A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey, Herman and Corn. I'd love to chat today in a bit more depth than we have before about the concept of sound sensitivity. And before I do so, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Haozen. This means in English, the ear. It's an audiology clinic here in Jerusalem. And these people are lifesavers. I bought my pair of custom earplugs when we moved into our new apartment. And I did not know, I guess I should have known this living above a busy intersection, that it would be crazy noisy with continuous honking. And one does acclimatize to a situation like this, but you also do feel when it's happening in your bedroom, you kind of feel there's no escape. And in a state of desperation, I went out and got a pair of Sony over-the-ear headphones, but also picked up a pair of custom earplugs. And these were literally the greatest purchase that I've recommended it to anyone who will hear me out, that these can be a game changer. And what they are essentially is you go to an audiology clinic and someone pours some wax in your ear. No, it doesn't hurt. Yes, it does feel weird. But it forms and you get them back in a couple of weeks, or a few days, depending on the turnaround. And these are basically precision fit to the unique shape of your ear canal, which apparently everyone has a slightly different ear canal. There's a fact you didn't want to know, or probably didn't need to know, but that's what we do here in My Word Prompts. And these are just absolutely brilliant. The other very good thing about this purchasing process is it's very consultative. You sit with an audiologist. They test your hearing, but usually if you're looking for stuff because you're sound sensitive, your hearing is physically fine. But they'll sit with you and they'll say, what is it? What are the sounds that you find bothersome? What material do you find comfortable? Any color preference? And they'll give you a product that is basically bespoke to your needs. And as much as I love loops, and they've done a great job of putting sound sensitivity on the map, if you're really struggling, I highly recommend these. They were like, I'm going to say $100 to $150, but they're theoretically, you can use them for life. You wash them, you keep them hygienic, but to my mind, they're in a different caliber completely than anything else I've used. They're incredibly comfortable, and they make me happy. At a point when I was really struggling with this, just to know I had something good was worth more than the earplugs. So yeah, big shout out to them. And for those who are struggling with what we're going to discuss in today's episode, I think an option worth considering. There's also, of course, stuff like earplugs and ANC and earmuffs, but not to be discounted, the custom earplugs. Okay, so I want to talk today about the differences between what we group together, and I would probably do this as well, of sound sensitivity. So my particular form of it is, and I'm never sure, because I've heard other people with ADHD talk about this, and I don't know if there is kind of a name for this specific form, but if somebody is having a loud conversation in the same room where I'm trying to do some kind of focus work, like work on a white paper, for me, it's really challenging to think, because my brain is like being pulled into that conversation. The same thing if I was sitting with someone in a coffee shop and trying to have like a really focused conversation, I just kind of pick up on the peripheral noise, and I find it distracting and bothersome. What I've noticed about this is that it's very situational for me. If I'm in a relaxed context, like I'm hanging out with friends, I don't even hear those same conversations. So it's like when I'm trying to focus on work, I can't block them out. But when I'm in a less intense environment where I'm actually listening to other people around me, the stuff at the edge of that audio space doesn't bother me at all, basically. So that's number one. And I think this is something that folks with ADHD commonly report, but we're all not too sure what this thing is called. Within the more traditional categories of people who experience sound differently, you have something called misophonia, if I'm not mispronouncing it. And sometimes I've noticed there's a little bit of overlap, but also that they're very different. So some people, the sound of like crisps, the foil of a bag of crisps crinkling or loud chewing will just make them like really, really angry. But what strikes me as a commonality between these two things is that they both are involuntary, um, and they both trigger this internal cascade of strong emotions that we feel are out of our control. Another one, for example, is a crying baby, like dear Mr. Ezra, and why I asked the audiology clinic if they could make me up a pair that was suitable for parenting use. Is my feeling was sometimes when you go through these really intense periods of yelling. I mean, I guess everyone finds that stressful, maybe, but for me, it really kind of, and I never want to be in that position where I'm feeling angry or stressed because of a sound like that. Um, so I guess there's a whole conduit here of things we can talk about, but it's very relevant to where we're living in Jerusalem. I've had the privilege of being able to recommend this audiology shop to more people than I can remember, simply because we're living in a city with constant construction going on around us, and it creates noise. And so many people are living in awful conditions with the light rail construction starting at 7 on the dot. That's legally when you can start in Israel, and that might be legal. But if you have that happening 6 days a week, your concept of peace and quiet goes out the window. And sometimes renters, or you own property, you didn't see it coming. It just shows up at your doorstep, and you have to live with it. And the final thing I'd like to chat about, Herman and Corin, beyond the actual categorization or delineating between these different forms of sound intolerance or noise intolerance, is white noise machines, masking. We talked up to now um, custom earplugs and passive isolation. There's also white noise machines for masking, and there's also ANC, active noise cancellation, like those headphones you see, which try to hear the frequencies that are going around you and cancel it out. Now, the challenge to my mind is if you're trying to work, an ANC pair might be good. If you're trying to sleep, I haven't seen ANC products that kind of try to do the job of white noise machines a bit more intelligently. Either way, Herman and Corin, there's a lot to, I think, sift through here. I'd love to know exactly what these different forms, for those who do have a acoustic world that is a bit different than the other people. What delineates between these different conditions, and what would you recommend for people who have this and they're looking to sift through? Okay, what might help them most? Is it going to be a custom earplug, an ANC, a good pair of ANC earplugs, white noise machine, all three, something else? A lot of potential options. What would you recommend it to? And finally, sorry, in the context of employment, this is one that came up for me in my last in-house position, where we shared a room with the delightful sales team who were essentially on constant sales webinars. And I was the sort of marketing writer, but for a very techy IoT company. And I mentioned writing a white paper because that was literally, I wrote a series of them on very specific topics like LoRaWAN networks. And I was lucky enough that I think I was able to tell my boss, and it took me so long to just work up the confidence to have this conversation, saying, I like this company, I'm really enjoying this white paper, but I just can't do it with sales calls in the background. Either find me somewhere else to work, find me another desk, let me work from home 1 day a week. It'll be better for me, and you'll get your white paper back more quickly. But having that conversation took a lot of. I was very scared. They'd say you're difficult, and I guess for those who feel the need to ask for some kind of accommodations like that, and maybe want to work in house, but they're hesitant to do so because of the idea that it might be a very impossible environment for them to work with. It seems like a very poor reason to miss out on the benefits of working in an in-office job. What would you say for those who are looking at interviewing, or maybe just already working somewhere and want to kind of have that conversation honestly and transparently, without maybe turning off the hiring party? Over to you two.
Hey there, and welcome back to my Weird Prompts. I am Korn, and today we are tackling a topic that hits very close to home for us here in Jerusalem. It is March 2026, and it seems like everywhere you turn in the city, there is either a new branch of the Green Line light rail being blasted into the bedrock, a jackhammer going off at 7 in the morning, or a chorus of car horns at a busy intersection. Our housemate Daniel actually sent us a prompt about this recently. He has been dealing with some serious sound sensitivity after moving into a new apartment near a noisy junction. He even went as far as getting custom-molded earplugs from a clinic here called Halozen.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have to say Daniel is onto something. The sensory environment of a modern city is basically a constant assault on the nervous system, especially if your brain is wired a bit differently. I have been looking into the audiology and the neurology behind this, and it is fascinating how many distinct ways humans can be intolerant of sound. It is not just one thing. People often lump it all together as being easily distracted, but the underlying mechanisms are quite diverse.
It is interesting that you say that, Herman, because Daniel mentioned he finds it nearly impossible to focus on work when there is peripheral noise, like a conversation in the next room. But then he also mentioned misophonia, where specific sounds like crinkling foil or someone chewing can trigger an almost visceral emotional reaction. Are those two things part of the same spectrum, or are we looking at completely different biological responses?
That is exactly the right question to start with. We really need to delineate these conditions because the way you manage them is different. On one hand, you have hyperacusis. This is a physiological condition where sounds that most people find normal are perceived as uncomfortably loud or even physically painful. If a plate clattering in the sink feels like a gunshot to you, that might be hyperacusis. It is often linked to the way the brain gains or amplifies signals from the inner ear, specifically a dysfunction in the efferent system that normally dampens loud inputs.
Okay, so that is a volume or intensity issue. What about the emotional side, the misophonia?
Misophonia is different. It is literally a hatred of sound, but specifically certain sounds. It is not about the decibel level. You could hear someone whispering while they eat a crisp, and even if it is very quiet, it triggers a fight or flight response. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that handles threats, just lights up. It is an intense, involuntary emotional reaction. Anger, disgust, or a need to escape the room. It is more of a connectivity issue between the auditory cortex and the limbic system.
And then there is the ADHD angle. Daniel noted that his struggle to focus with peripheral noise is something he has heard other people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder describe. In that case, it does not seem like he hates the sound or that it is physically painful. It just seems like his brain cannot stop processing it.
Precisely. That is often called sensory overresponsivity or a lack of sensory gating. Most neurotypical brains have a built-in filter in the thalamus. If we are sitting in a cafe, your brain tells itself, okay, the person talking at the next table is irrelevant, the espresso machine is irrelevant, focus on Herman. But for many people with ADHD, that filter is porous or non-existent. Every single data point, every snippet of conversation, every tapping foot is treated with the same priority by the brain. It is not that the sound is too loud, it is that the brain is refusing to ignore it. We actually touched on some of the tech for managing this back in episode 435 when we looked at sensory overload.
I remember that. It is like having a radio that is tuned to 5 stations at once. You are trying to listen to the news, but you are also getting a heavy metal track and a weather report at the same volume. It is exhausting. I think it is important for people to realize that this is not a character flaw. It is not that Daniel is being difficult or overly sensitive in a psychological sense. His brain is literally doing more work than yours is to process the same environment.
100%. And when you add the context of Jerusalem, it gets even more intense. The light rail construction Daniel mentioned is a great example. If you have that porous sensory filter, the rhythmic thudding of a pile driver or the high-pitched beep of a reversing truck is not just a background noise. It is an active interruption of your internal monologue every few seconds. It causes cognitive fatigue. By the time you get to lunch, your brain has used up its entire daily budget of energy just trying to stay focused.
So, let us talk about the tools. Daniel mentioned he got these custom earplugs from Halozen. He seemed really impressed by the process, how they take a silicone mold of your ear canal and tune the plugs to specific needs. How do those compare to the more common solutions like active noise cancellation headphones, or just a white noise machine?
They are different tools for different jobs. Custom earplugs like the ones from Hausen are primarily a form of passive isolation. Because they are molded exactly to your ear canal, they create a near-perfect seal. This is much more effective and comfortable than those foam plugs you buy at the pharmacy. The cool thing about high-end custom plugs is that they can use acoustic filters. You can get filters that drop the volume of everything by, say, 20 decibels, but keep the frequency response flat. That means music and speech still sound clear, just quieter. This is great for someone with hyperacusis who still wants to be part of the world but needs the edge taken off.
That sounds like a game changer for a busy office or even a loud family dinner. But what about when you are trying to work? Daniel mentioned he bought some Sony over-the-ear headphones with active noise cancellation.
Active noise cancellation, or ANC, is a miracle of modern engineering, but it has limitations. It works by using microphones to listen to external sounds and then creating an inverted sound wave to cancel them out. It is incredibly effective at removing low-frequency, consistent sounds. Think of the drone of an airplane engine, the hum of an air conditioner, or the distant rumble of traffic from that intersection Daniel lives near. However, ANC is notoriously bad at canceling out sudden sharp or high-frequency sounds. It cannot react fast enough to a baby crying or a colleague laughing loudly.
So if your issue is the hum of the city, ANC is your best friend. But if your issue is people talking while you are trying to write a white paper, the ANC might actually make the voices stand out more because the background hum has been removed.
That is a common complaint. Once you remove the low-frequency mask of the office ventilation, you can hear exactly what Karen from accounting is saying about her weekend. That is where sound masking comes in, like white noise, pink noise, or brown noise machines.
I've always wondered about the different colors of noise. I use a white noise app sometimes, but I find it a bit shrill after an hour.
That is because white noise has equal power across all frequencies. To the human ear, which is very sensitive to high frequencies, it sounds like static or a harsh hiss. Pink noise is more balanced, it has more power at lower frequencies, which sounds more natural, like falling rain or wind in the trees. Brown noise goes even deeper, like a low roar or a distant thunder. For people with ADHD, brown or pink noise can be incredibly soothing because it provides a consistent, predictable blanket of sound that covers up those sharp, distracting peripheral noises. It gives the brain one simple thing to focus on instead of 10 unpredictable things.
So, if we were to give Daniel a recommendation, it sounds like a layered approach is best. Maybe the custom earplugs for when he is out and about in Jerusalem, ANC headphones for the traffic noise at home, and perhaps a pink noise machine running in the background while he works to mask those conversations that pull his brain away.
That is a solid strategy. I would also add that for sleep, custom earplugs are often the only viable option. You cannot really sleep comfortably in large over-ear headphones, and white noise machines might not be enough to block out a car alarm at 3 in the morning.
I want to pivot to the workplace side of this, because Daniel brought up a really important point. He was working in-house for a tech company, sharing a room with a sales team that was constantly on webinars. He struggled to find the confidence to ask for accommodations because he did not want to be seen as difficult. This is something we discussed in episode 820, The Art of ADHD Diplomacy. How do you have that conversation without sounding like a diva?
It is a delicate balance, but it starts with reframing the conversation. Instead of saying, I cannot work because you guys are too loud, which sounds accusatory, you frame it in terms of productivity and business value. You might say, I have noticed that my best, most efficient work happens when I have a high level of acoustic isolation. To make sure I am delivering these white papers on time and at the highest quality, I would like to discuss some adjustments to my workspace.
That is a great approach. You are making it about the company's goals, not just your personal comfort. You are basically saying, if you want the best version of my work, here is the environment that produces it.
Right. And you should come to the table with solutions, not just problems. Do not just say, it is too loud. Say, I have looked at the office layout, and I think I would be significantly more productive if I could move my desk to that quieter corner, or if I could work from home 2 days a week for deep focused tasks. Or even just, I would like to use noise-canceling headphones while I am at my desk, and I want to make sure you know that if you need me, you can just ping me on Slack.
That is key, the communication channel. A lot of managers worry that if an employee has headphones on, they are checked out or unreachable. By proactively saying, I am using these to focus, but I am still available on our messaging app, you remove that anxiety for the boss.
You also have to be honest about the neurological reality without necessarily needing to give a full medical history. You can simply say, I have a sensory processing style that makes it very difficult for me to tune out background speech. It is just how my brain is wired. Most reasonable employers in 2026 understand that neurodiversity is a real thing. They want their employees to be in a state of flow. If a $500 pair of headphones or a desk move increases your output by 20%, that is a massive return on investment for them.
I think there is also an element of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, which we covered in episode 844. For someone with ADHD, the fear of being perceived as demanding or annoying can be paralyzing. They might suffer in silence for months, getting more and more stressed, rather than having a 5-minute conversation that could solve the problem.
That is so true. The stress of trying to force yourself to focus in a hostile sensory environment actually makes the ADHD symptoms worse. It is a vicious cycle. Your executive function takes a hit because you are constantly understimulated or overstimulated, and then you feel even more guilty about your lack of productivity. Breaking that cycle requires a bit of bravery, but usually, once the accommodation is made, everyone is happier. The sales team does not have to feel guilty about talking, and the writer gets their work done.
It is also worth noting that in many jurisdictions, including here in Israel and in the United States under the Americans with Disabilities Act, reasonable accommodations for neurodivergent employees are a legal requirement. You do not always have to lead with the law, but knowing it is on your side can give you that extra boost of confidence.
And honestly, sometimes the solution is as simple as the company buying a few high-quality acoustic dividers or a white noise system for the whole office. It often helps everyone, not just the person who asked. Most people find it hard to focus when someone is shouting into a headset 3 feet away. Some people are just better at masking the struggle than others.
Before we wrap up this section, I want to go back to the city itself. Jerusalem is such a unique case. We have these ancient stone buildings that reflect sound incredibly well, and then we have this modern, high-intensity construction. I wonder if we are going to see a shift in urban planning or architecture that takes sound sensitivity more seriously.
I hope so. There is a movement called acoustic urbanism that looks at how we can design cities to be quieter. This means things like quiet asphalt that absorbs tire noise, more green belts which act as natural sound buffers, and building codes that require better sound insulation in apartments. In a city as dense as Jerusalem, where you have thousands of years of history clashing with a modern light rail system, it is a massive challenge. But as we understand more about the impact of noise on mental health and cognitive function, it has to become a priority.
It is not just a luxury. Constant noise exposure is linked to higher cortisol levels, heart disease, and of course, burnout. For people like Daniel and many of our listeners, managing this is a matter of long-term health, not just short-term focus.
Well said. Whether it is through custom earplugs from a place like Hausen or advocating for yourself at work, taking control of your acoustic environment is one of the best things you can do for your brain.
I think that is a perfect place to take a quick breather. When we come back, I want to dig a bit deeper into some of the more unusual forms of sound intolerance, and maybe look at some of the emerging tech that might go beyond just blocking sound.
Looking forward to it. There is some wild stuff happening with bone conduction and targeted sound zones that we should definitely touch on.
All right, we are back. We have been talking about the common forms of sound sensitivity, but Herman, you mentioned there are some more obscure or emerging areas we should explore. What else is out there that people might be experiencing without having a name for it?
Well, there is something called phonophobia, which is a fear of loud sounds. Unlike hyperacusis, which is about physical pain, or misophonia, which is about a specific trigger, phonophobia is often an anxiety-based reaction to the anticipation of a loud noise. Think of someone who gets incredibly anxious around balloons because they might pop. It is an anticipatory stress response.
I can see how that would be incredibly draining in a city. You are constantly on edge waiting for the next siren or construction blast.
Precisely. And then there is a very strange one called explosive head syndrome. It sounds terrifying, but it is actually a benign condition where a person hears a loud imaginary noise, like a bomb going off or a door slamming, right as they are falling asleep or waking up. It is a type of sleep disorder, a parasomnia. It is not an external sound at all, but the brain processes it as if it were incredibly loud.
That sounds like a nightmare, literally. It just goes to show how much of our experience of sound is constructed within the brain, rather than just being a direct recording of the outside world.
That is the key takeaway. Your ears are just the microphones. Your brain is the sound engineer, the editor, and sometimes the Foley artist. When that process is out of sync, the world becomes a very difficult place to navigate.
So, looking forward, what are you excited about in terms of technology? We talked about ANC and earplugs, but what is on the horizon for 2026 and beyond?
I am really interested in the development of hearables that use artificial intelligence to do selective filtering. Imagine a pair of earbuds that can identify your spouse's voice and amplify it while simultaneously identifying and canceling out the sound of the vacuum cleaner they are using. We are getting very close to that. It is called computational auditory scene analysis. Instead of just blocking all sound, the device understands the scene and lets you choose what to hear.
That would be incredible for people with ADHD. You could basically set your own priority levels for different types of sounds in your environment.
You could tell your headphones to ignore everything except for sirens, your name being called, and the music you are listening to. It would be a digital filter for that porous sensory gate we talked about. There is also some interesting work being done with bone conduction. Instead of blocking the ear canal, these devices send vibrations through the bones of the skull directly to the inner ear. This allows you to keep your ears open to the environment for safety while still having a clear audio stream for work or communication.
It is like having a private soundtrack to your life that doesn't interfere with your ability to hear the world. I can see that being very useful for people who feel claustrophobic with traditional earplugs.
Definitely. Some people hate the feeling of something being in their ear or the pressure change you get with ANC. Bone conduction is a great alternative for them.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from the clinics in Jerusalem to the neurology of ADHD and the future of AI-powered hearables. If you are listening to this and you have been struggling with noise, I hope this makes you feel a little less alone and a little more empowered to find a solution.
And remember, if you found this episode helpful, check out episode 495, where we discuss the ADHD medication maze. Sometimes managing the underlying neurochemistry can also help with the sensory processing side of things. It is all connected.
Before we sign off, I want to give a quick thank you to Daniel for sending in this prompt. It is a topic that affects so many of us, especially here in the heart of Jerusalem. If you're enjoying my weird prompts, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and join the conversation.
It really does. We love hearing from you and knowing which topics are hitting home.
You can find all our past episodes and a way to get in touch at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We are also available on Spotify and most other platforms.
Thanks for joining us today. I am Herman Poppleberry.
And I am Corn. We will see you next time on My Weird Prompts.
Stay curious and maybe find a quiet spot to relax this weekend.
If you can find one in this city.
True. Maybe just put those earplugs in.
Talk to you soon, everyone.
Take care.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.